Okay, so in the So, in the last class, we discussed international relations, and we started with the United Nations, right? We started with the United Nations, and we were discussing the principal organs of the United Nations. Okay, we were discussing the principal organs of the United Nations. We told that there are different principal organs. We haven't discussed all the principal organs as such. Out of which we have discussed the Economic and Social Council, General Assembly, UNSC, that is the Security Council, and we have to discuss a few more. We have been till what point did we write? We have been discussing International Court of Justice, right? We have been discussing International Court of Justice. So, someone from what you have written, please read out what International Court of Justice is for the benefit of the whole class. Someone who has written it down.
Composed of 50 judges elected to 9 years of office by the United Nations. General Assembly and Security Council, setting independently of each other. It may not include more than one judge of any nationality. Elections are held every 3 years for 1/3 of the seats. After retired, will be re-elected. The qualifications will be the judges must pass the qualification required in the representative country or appointed in the highest form of office. When the court does not include a judge possessing the nationality, then he or she can be reconsidered again during the election.
Okay, so the thing regarding International Court of Justice is it is headquartered in Hague, Netherlands. Okay, International Court of Justice, also known as ICJ, is one of the principal organs of the judicial organ of the United Nations, and it is headquartered in Hague, Netherlands. Okay, so that being the first point, what can be the functions of the International Court of Justice from the word itself or from the term International Court of Justice itself, from that word or term itself, you will be able to understand that Kerala India, High Court, Supreme Court, in other nations where there are courts, the same functions are applicable to the International Court of Justice. Okay, where what is done, where the states present their problems, where the state presents their disputes between other states or with other states, and the International Court of Justice settles their disputes. Okay, it settles their disputes or it solves that case in such a way that whoever has the right in that case or whoever the justice is allocated in that case. For example, if we are taking the India-Pakistan case for that reason, okay, you understand that issue, and if the International Court of Justice, just an example, if the International Court of Justice believes that or firmly states that India has its own justice part, while Pakistan doesn't have, okay, Pakistan has done something wrong, while India has been doing so far so good in the terms of justice, then the case or the dispute will be solved in the favor of India. Okay, for the reason that injustice stands with the provisions of India. Okay, I hope you are getting that. That is in general with the or in concept with what happens in the High Court or the Supreme Court of India. Okay, so where justice would be delivered, where the exact justice point lies with which state. Okay, which state or whichever country has the justice, or which state or whichever country has done just policies. Just policies, JUST, just policies are policies which are right. ഏത് കൺട്രീസ് ആണോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഏത് കൺട്രി ആണോ ഏത് സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ആണോ റൈറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു പോളിസി മെയിൻറ്റെയിൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ whichever country has been maintaining the right or the just policies, that country would be given justice by the International Court of Justice. അപ്പോൾ അതിന് there are a lot of judges in that. There are a lot of judges and they are elected for a 9-year term. So that is the case with the International Court of Justice. Okay, and this International Court of Justice is different from the International Criminal Court. Okay, International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court, both of these are different organizations. Okay, You can note down the difference. You can note down the difference as such. Write ICJ in one part and write International Criminal Court (ICC) in another part. I mean, you can divide it into two. And as the first point of the International Court of Justice, you can note down, it has no jurisdiction. It has no jurisdiction. It has no jurisdiction to try individuals. It has no jurisdiction to try individuals accused of war crimes, accused of war crimes or crimes against humanity. As it is not a criminal court, as it is not a criminal court, it does not have a prosecutor. It does not have a prosecutor. It does not have a prosecutor who is able to initiate. It does not have a prosecutor who is able to initiate proceedings. Who is able to initiate proceedings. And in the part of the International Criminal Court, you can write down it has jurisdiction. It has jurisdiction to prosecute individuals. To prosecute individuals for the international crimes such as prosecute individuals for the international crimes such as genocide, CENOCID, genocide, crimes against humanity, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. So, number crimes, you might have heard about crimes, you might have heard about a lot of killings that have happened all around this world. Number serious crime, what do we call a big crime? Or a serious crime is something such as genocide, massacre, crimes against humanity. For example, Russia-Ukraine war. These are serious crimes or serious wars, okay? What do we mean by, and I'll tell you one more difference also. What is the difference between a war and a cold war? War അല്ലെങ്കിൽ cold war, WAR, war അല്ലെങ്കിൽ cold war തമ്മിലുള്ള difference എന്താ? War എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ it is also known as hot war in that sense, okay? War ന്റെ meaning എന്താന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ where there is a mutual tension between two parties. It can be between two parties or among a lot of parties where the arms are used. Arms, weapons are used, okay? But when it comes to the case of Cold War, there might be political tensions, there might be mutual tensions between two or more than two parties, but the use of arms will not be there. Arms are not weapons, okay? The use of weapons will not be there. Appo cold aayittulla oru war aanu. If you ask me whether it's a war, or if you ask anyone if it's a war, it is a war, but there are only political tensions between two or among some parties, okay? There is no such physical involvement, as we told, there is no such physical involvement using arms, weapons, etc. That's the difference between a war and a cold war, okay? A war na hot war ennu parayum. Recently, one is known as cold war and the other becomes hot. So the thing which you have to understand is the difference between a war and a cold war. If anyone asks you, or if you want to write for any examination, or if you want to answer in any competitive examination, In a Cold War, there is no physical use of weapons. That is the basic thing. In a Cold War, there is no physical use or there is no use of arms or weapons. But in the case of a war, as you all know, there is definitely use of weapons, arms, and everything. So we'll familiarize with the other terms like this Cold War, genocide, etc. in the coming hours. Next, we'll move to the next principal organ which we are going to study, which is a major component of the United Nations, that is the Secretariat. You can write down the Secretariat. So who will head the Secretariat? Who will be the head of the Secretariat? Who is the head of the United Nations? Who is the head of the United Nations? Who is Antonio Guterres? He is the Secretary General. So the head of the Secretariat is the Secretary General. Okay. Write down as the first point. Head of the Secretariat is the Secretary General. Head of the Secretariat. Put a hyphen or you can write it in any way. This is the Secretary General. And for those who don't know, the current or the present Secretary General is Antonio Guterres. Okay. For those who don't know, you can note it down. It is Antonio, ANTONIO Guterres, GUTERRES. Antonio Guterres. Okay. So we can note down a definition of the Secretariat. The Secretariat is an international staff. The Secretariat is an international staff. Is an international staff working in duty stations. Working in duty stations. Working in duty stations around the world. Around the world, carries out the day-to-day and carries out the day-to-day work of the organization. A day-to-day work and diverse, okay? Diverse day-to-day work. Diverse day-to-day work of the organization. It serves the other principal organs. It serves the other principal organs of the United Nations or of the UN. It serves the other principal organs of the UN and administers the programs and administers the programs and policies laid down by them. And administers the programs and policies laid down by them. The duties carried out by the Secretariat. The duties carried out by the Secretariat. The duties carried out by the Secretariat are as varied as the problems dealt with by the United Nations. Dealt, DEALT, dealt with by the UN. Dealt with by the UN. These range from administering peacekeeping operations. These range from administering peacekeeping operations, to meditating, to mediating, okay, sorry, to mediating international disputes, comma, from surveying economic, and social trends. Surveying economic and social trends. Social trends. TRENDS. Social trends and problems. To preparing studies. On human rights and sustainable development. To preparing studies on human rights and sustainable development. Secretariat staff. Also informs the world's communications. The world's communications media. The world's communications media about the work of the United Nations. You write UN, okay, about the work of the UN. About the work of the UN, comma, organize international conferences. Organize international conferences. On issues of worldwide concern. On issues of worldwide concern. And interpret speeches. And translate documents. And translates documents into the organization's official language. Translates documents into documents. And translates documents into organizations' official languages. Translates documents into organizations' official languages. Okay, so that is the concept regarding the secretariat. Okay, whenever you learn about the secretariat, you must be very aware of the functions that the secretariat performs. Okay, so who is the head of the secretariat? The Secretary General is the head of the secretariat, and there are, as the secretariat works in different countries or states, it carries out the day-to-day functions. Okay, day-to-day functions in administering programs. എന്തൊക്കെ programs United Nations ഉണ്ടാവും, whether it be the functions or the programs of the General Assembly, the Security Council, or whichever other organ of the United Nations, ആ പ്രോഗ്രാംസിനെ അഡ്മിനിസ്റ്റർ ചെയ്യാനും ആ പ്രോഗ്രാംസിനെ ഗവേൺ ചെയ്യാനും അഡ്മിനിസ്റ്റർ ചെയ്യാനും to find out whether it's a good program, find out what can be the measures to make it a good program. These are the things which the secretariat does. Okay. Apart from this, it also has focus on the sustainable development goals, the SDG, also known as the SDG. It also maintains a significant focus on sustainable development and on what can be the better ways to move forward. Okay. So as I've told you, what do you mean by sustainable development? We have discussed it several times in the class. What is sustainable development? What can be a right definition for sustainable development? It is the, what is sustainable development? Or in Malayalam, if you tell what is sustainable development? Development എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താ? What do you mean by development? Okay, that can be one way of mentioning sustainable development. Exactly, if you ask me what is sustainable development is, it is the present generation is able to meet, okay, their needs without compromising the needs of the future generation. Okay, ഫ്യൂച്ചർ ജനറേഷന് ഒരു തടസ്സം ഉണ്ടാവരുത്. നമ്മൾ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത് കൊണ്ട്, നമ്മൾ ഒരു റിസോഴ്സ് ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത് കൊണ്ട് ഫ്യൂച്ചർ ജനറേഷൻ ആ ഒരു റിസോഴ്സ് കിട്ടാണ്ട് പോകരുത്. That is the basic idea behind sustainable development. Okay, so whenever you hear this term sustainable development, you must have this. For those who want to write it down or not down, you can note it down. It is the ability of the present. It is the ability of the present generation. It is the ability of the present generation to meet its own needs. It is the ability of the present generation to meet its own needs. It is the ability of the present generation to meet its own needs without compromising the needs of the future generation. Without compromising the needs of the future generation. Without sacrificing the needs of the future generation. Okay. So whenever you write something about the secretariat, which is one of the principal organs of the United Nations, നമ്മുടെ സെക്രട്ടേറിയറ്റിന്റെ ഹെഡ് ആരാന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ ആണെന്ന്. So you must write down the functions. Okay, you must write down the functions of the secretariat, along which you must have an idea regarding who the secretary general is. Okay, secretary general name Antonio Guterres nalladalla. What are the functions that a secretary general must perform? You must have an idea regarding that to complete your writing regarding the secretariat. The secretariat ne kurichu eduthumbol aa writing complete avanamenki you must have an idea regarding what the secretary general performs. Okay, സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറലിന്റെ ഫംഗ്ഷൻസ് കൂടെ ഇൻവോൾവ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു കോമ്പോണന്റ് ആണ് സെക്രട്ടേറിയറ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. സോ റാൻഡം ആയിട്ട് I ask you what will be the functions of the secretary general? Secretary general is the head of the United Nations, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ the leader of the United Nations എന്നൊക്കെ പറയാം. So what can be the functions which a secretary general performs or will perform? നിങ്ങളുടെ ഐഡിയ what can be, എന്തൊക്കെയായിരിക്കും ഒരു സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ ചെയ്യേണ്ടത്? Being a head of such a large peacekeeping organization. Okay. Organizing and maintaining discipline across the organs of the United Nations, of course, which means being a diplomat. Okay, so that can be the first point, being a diplomat. I think roles of the secretary general that heading in the roles of the secretary general. Roles or functions of the secretary general. This comes under the secretariat. Okay, roles of the secretary general. Being a diplomat. Being a diplomat. Spokesman. Second point is spokesman or spokesperson for the interest of the world's people. Spokesman or spokesperson for the interest of the world's people. നമ്മൾ സ്പോക്സ്മാൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സ്പോക്സ് പേഴ്സൺ ആയിരുന്നു എഴുതി ഫോർ ദ വേൾഡ്സ് പീപ്പിൾ എന്ന് എഴുതി. അതിൽ തന്നെ ഏതൊരു സെക്ഷൻ ആയിരിക്കും ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ പുള്ളി അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്? ഹൂ വുഡ് ബി ഹി അഡ്വക്കേറ്റിംഗ് ഹി ഓർ ഷീ? ദ സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ. ഏതൊരു സെക്ഷൻ ആയിരിക്കും ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ സൊസൈറ്റിയിൽ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ സംസാരിക്കുന്നത് ആർക്ക് വേണ്ടിയായിരിക്കും? Poor and vulnerable sections. Okay, so you can write down in particular the poor and vulnerable sections. A second point continuation ആയിട്ട് തന്നെ എഴുതിയാണ്. Particular the poor and vulnerable sections. Third point, Chief Administrative Officer. Secretary General is the Chief Administrative Officer of the United Nations. The roles and functions of the Secretary General. Okay, these can be the roles as well as the functions or the powers of the Secretary General. Secretary General. Fourth point, you can write down the fourth point. Bring to the attention. Fourth point, bring to the attention. Bring to the attention of the Security Council. Bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter in which his opinion is of due importance. In which his opinion is of due importance. DUE. Due importance. One of the most vital roles, that can be the fifth point. Okay, one of the most vital roles performed by the Secretary General or SG is the use of his good offices. Is the use of his or her good offices. Good offices means doing good things or maintaining impartiality, maintaining a non-partisan attitude. ആരെ ഫേവർ ചെയ്യാണ്ട് ഒരു ഫേവറിറ്റിസം ഇല്ലാണ്ട് മൂവ് ചെയ്യുന്നതിനാണ് ഗുഡ് ഓഫീസസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഗുഡ് ജോബ് ഗുഡ് വർക്ക് എന്നൊക്കെ പറയും. ഓക്കെ, that can be the meaning of that. So these are the 5 functions. So you just go through what we have written down under the Secretariat. You just go through, you just read it in your mind, what we have written down under the Secretariat. International Court of Justice, we told that it is the judicial organ of the United Nations. Okay, judicial organ ആണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ what kind of an organ would be the Secretariat? If the International Court of Justice is a judicial organ, what kind of an organization or organ would be the Secretariat? It is the administrative organ of the United Nations. Okay, you can write it down somewhere. Secretariat and the heading in the side, you can write it down somewhere. It's a very important point. It is the administrative organ of the UN. Administrative organ of the UN. Go through that functions of the Secretary General. Okay, functions of the Secretary General, you go through that. Okay, so now you know the functions of the Secretary General or what all roles does he perform. You know that. You must have a clear understanding that the Secretary General is the Chief Administrative Officer of the United Nations, or the Chief Administrative, the person who has the Chief Administrative capacity in that organization of the United Nations is the Secretary General. Okay. Administrative ആയിട്ടുള്ള പോളിസീസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അഡ്മിനിസ്ട്രേറ്റീവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ പറയുമ്പോൾ it is also regarding the administrative duties that he performs, administering programs of the United Nations. It is also about recommending certain things to Security Council as well as the General Assembly. ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരുപാട് വെറൈറ്റി ഓഫ് ഫങ്ഷൻസ്, ഡൈവേഴ്സിഫൈഡ് ഫങ്ഷൻസ് പെർഫോം ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരാളാണ് സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ. ഓക്കെ, സോ ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് ആൻ ഈസി പൊസിഷൻ ടു ഹാൻഡിൽ. It is actually the globe or the world is in his hands. Okay, if he has a favoritism അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പാർട്ടിസൺ ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ്, ഒരു പാർഷ്യാലിറ്റി ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു കൺട്രിയോട് ഒരു സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ ഉണ്ടെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ, the problem is that it can turn in a very bad way. For example, ഒരു പാർട്ടിസൺ ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു പാർട്ടി അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു സ്റ്റേറ്റിനെ ഫേവർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ്, ഒരു കൺട്രിയെ ഫേവർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് ഒരു സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ, വാട്ട് ക്യാൻ ബി ദി പ്രോബ്ലംസ് the world will face? ഒരു സിംഗിൾ വേർഡ് ആയിട്ട് നിങ്ങൾ പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ എന്ത് പറയും? ഡിസ്ക്രിമിനേഷൻ. ഒരു സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ ഒരൊറ്റ കൺട്രിയെ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ ഇന്ത്യ പാകിസ്ഥാൻ, ആൻഡ് യു ഇമാജിൻ ദാറ്റ് ദി സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ ഡസന്റ് ഹാവ് എനി റിലേഷൻ ടു ഇന്ത്യ. ഇന്ത്യനെ ഒട്ടും സപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യാത്ത ഒരു സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ ആണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ത്യനോട് ഒട്ടും ഫേവർ ചെയ്യാത്തൊരു, ഇന്ത്യ ഈവൻ ഇഫ് ദ ജസ്റ്റിസ് ലൈസ് വിത്ത് ഇൻ ദ ഹാൻഡ്സ് ഓഫ് ഇന്ത്യ, ഇന്ത്യനെ സപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യാത്ത ഒരു സെക്രട്ടറി ജനറൽ ആണെന്ന് വെച്ചോ. ഓക്കെ, അസ്യൂം ദാറ്റ്. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഡിപ്ലോമാറ്റ് അല്ലാത്ത ഒരാൾ കൊണ്ടുവരില്ല. ബട്ട് സ്റ്റിൽ I'm asking you, in another word, if you are telling that the outcome of this would be a third world war. Okay, because United Nations is the organization which is preventing another world war. With second world war and third world war ആകാണ്ട് escalate ചെയ്യുന്ന organization ആണ്, organ ആണ് UN. Okay, there might be a lot of people coming with a lot of criticism against United Nations, പക്ഷെ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ ഇല്ലായിരുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഒരു third world war, what experts predict is that a third world war would have occurred between 1960s to 70s. ആ ഒരു പീരീഡിൽ തന്നെ ഒരു തേർഡ് വേൾഡ് വാർ ഉണ്ടായേനെ. ബട്ട് ഡ്യൂ ടു ദിസ് ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ മേ ബി ഇറ്റ് ഹാസ് ബീൻ ഇൻഎഫക്റ്റീവ് ഇൻ സർട്ടൻ ഏരിയാസ് ഓർ സർട്ടൻ വാർഡ്സ്. പക്ഷെ ആ ഒരു ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ ഉള്ളതുകൊണ്ടാണ് വി ആർ സ്റ്റിൽ നോട്ട് ഫേസിംഗ് ദ തേർഡ് വേൾഡ് വാർ. ഈവൻ വെൻ വി ഹാവ് സർട്ടൻ വാർസ് ലൈക്ക് റഷ്യ-യുക്രൈൻ വാർ which has been in a very large scale, still we are not having a third world war. Okay, അപ്പം നോൺ പാർട്ടിസൺ ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് ഉള്ളൊരു, അപ്പൊ ഇതൊക്കെ these can be the qualities required for what? For whom? The Secretary General. ഒരു നോൺ പാർട്ടിസൺ ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇംപാർഷ്യൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ്, ഒരു വളരെ ഡിപ്ലോമാറ്റ് ഉള്ള ഒരാൾ. We have written that point out. He should be a diplomat. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ as he told, what was the point that you told? He must be a diplomat in the sense that he must be organizing different functions of all the organs very effectively. Okay, so now as you know that, do you know the list of the Secretary Generals who are been there in the United Nations? Does anyone know all the names of the Secretary Generals who have been there in the United Nations till now? Antonio Guterres vare. No. Okay, so you can note it down. This asks for a variety of competitive examinations. You just write out list of Secretary Generals. List of Secretary Generals. First one, നിങ്ങൾക്ക് Antonio Guterres എന്ന് എഴുതാം. We'll go it down in a descending order. Okay? First one, Antonio Guterres. Antonio Guterres. നമ്മൾ റീസെന്റ് എന്ന് പാസ്റ്റിലോട്ട് പോകും. Second one is Ban Ki-moon. BAN. Might have heard these names, I don't know. Ban Ki-moon. BANKIMON. Ban Ki-moon. You also must know the nationality of these people. Okay, Antonio Guterres was a Portuguese person. He was from Portugal. He was the former Portugal Prime Minister, I guess. He was from Portugal. Ban Ki-moon was from South Korea. There's no doubt in bracket or something. South Korea. Kofi Annan, KOFI, third person. KOFI, Annan, ANNAN, ANN. He was from Ghana. GHAN. Hana. Boutros Ghali. BOUTROS. BOUTROS. Again, repeat that word. Boutros Ghali. GHAN. Also known as BB Ghali. Boutros Ghali. He was from Egypt. He was the Secretary General from Egypt. Boutros Ghali. Okay. Next person was Javier Perez de Cuellar. JAVIER. I'll tell you the spelling. JAVIER. PEREZ. P for parrot. PEREZ. Right. A small D and a E. Then more single name. Don't just join it. Javier Perez de Cuellar. CUE. AR. So it is written as Javier, it is pronounced as Javier. Cuellar. He was, I'm not sure whether the exact pronunciation is like this. He was from Peru. He was from Peru. Next person is Kurt. 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 Valde. WAL. DHEIM. WALDHEIM. Kurt Valde. He was from Austria. Not Australia, Austria. Next one is Thant. 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 He was from Burma. That is now known as Myanmar. Write out Myanmar. Next person is Dag. DAG. Dag Hammarskjöld. HAMMARSKJOLD. OLD. Dag Hammarskjöld. He was from Sweden. He was Swedish Secretary General. He was from Sweden. And the first Secretary General was Tryggve. TRY GVE LIE. It's not LEE, it's LIE. Tryggve. His pronunciation is Tryggve. TRY GVE LIE. It's two different names, okay? Tryggve Lee. And he was from Norway. He was the first Secretary General. You can mark Tryggve Lee, okay? Tryggve Lee, Kofi. All those people were very important personalities also. Tryggve Lee, Kofi, Ban Ki-moon. Okay, these are the people. Among these people were very famous. That is Tryggve Lee, Ban Ki-moon, Kofi, then Antonio Guterres. These people are very famous. Okay. So these are the different secretary generals that have been there from the inception of the United Nations. When was United Nations formed? 1945. Okay. since the inception of the United Nations, since the inception means since the beginning of the United Nations or since the formation of the United Nations, these many secretary generals have been there. If we look at how many secretary generals, the number is very less. But these many secretary generals have been there for what? What are the functions that they have been performing? They have been the chief administrative officers. They've been carrying out programs in the sense they've been administering programs which the Secretary General, General Assembly, and other organs have been performing. Okay. And they are the overall charge of the United Nations, not only of the principal organs, but also of the specialized agencies, which we'll learn later. Okay. So the position which the Secretary General has, the position which he carries is a very pivotal position or a very coveted position, a person which many people dream of in this world. And a person who becomes a Secretary General must be what kind of a personality? A diplomat, a person who maintains a non-partisan attitude, an impartial person, a person who doesn't favor any country or any state. Okay. In case if he favors any country or any state, it can lead to another world war, that is the third world war, or to the destruction of the humanity. Okay, so that is a very important and a very pivotal position in this world. Next, we are just shifting our focus from the United Nations to the G4 nations. Okay, G4 nations or the global 4 nations. That's a different topic. G4 nations. You might have heard about G7, G20. Right? Likewise, G4. Do you know which all countries are there in G4? No. These are some important countries which are there in other organizations also, but definitely not the people who have the veto power in their hands. Except, yeah, they don't have veto power. These are very important countries in the context of the world's biggest powers, but they do not have this veto power, the so-called veto power in the Security Council. They are not permanent members of the UN Security Council. Who are the permanent members of the UN Security Council? Russia, China, US, France, and Britain. Okay, these are the 5 major powers or the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. Apart from these 5 countries, you can guess it. Saudi, no. India. India is a G4 member. Other than that, you think of the best nations. I'll give you a clue for that reason. Okay, out of the 4, 2 are very good footballing nations. Brazil, and the other one is Germany. Okay, other than these 3, India, Brazil, Germany, it is Japan. Okay, so you can write down the G4 nations: Brazil, Germany, India, and Japan. Brazil, Germany, India, and Japan. Are the 4 countries which support each other's bids, BID apostrophe S, each other's bids for permanent seats, permanent seats. Permanent seat permanent seats in the permanent seats where is this permanent seat? Where have we learned? UNSC, United Nations Security Council. For the permanent seats, the United Nations Security Council. Permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council. So as I've told you this much regarding G4 nations, what would be the primary aim? G4 community and G4 nations in the primary aim? What would be their primary aim? You have already written it down. What is their their main aim or their prime objective? Exactly. You can write down as the primary aim. It is to get a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council or UNSC. That is their primary aim or primary objective. To get a permanent seat in the UNSC. Each of these four countries has figured out among the you cut out that out, okay, has figured among the, there's no need of out in that word, has figured among the elected non-permanent members, has figured among the elected non-permanent members. You can underline that, okay? Elected non-permanent members, you can underline that. That's an important statement. Elected non-permanent members of the council since the UN's establishment. The economic and political influence of these countries the economic and political influence of these countries have grown significantly higher the past few decades. What is Japan known for? Japan na country ഏറ്റവും famous ആയിട്ടുള്ള, it is for what? Yeah, exporting trade. Our major component എന്താ? What is the major component which makes Japan one of the major countries in this world? What's it? Robotics, yeah, technology, robotics. Same with Germany for that reason. Germany manufactures a lot of things, especially cars, right? That is the major factory or industry associated with Germany. The major industry associated with Germany, they are very much involved in robotics, AI, etc. When it comes to Brazil, what are they investing more in? Not in football. Other than that, what are the major investments coming in? Okay, oil. Brazil, if you understand these three countries, that can be the difference, okay? You take Germany, India, and Japan, okay? These three countries have something very pertinent in their, trading pattern, right? If you take the case of Japan, as he rightly mentioned, robotics, AI, technology, those things are there with Japan. Germany, again, say manufacturing, cars, other manufacturing technologies, it's very high in Germany. When it comes to the case of India, India also very much focusing on now on the industrial sector, but still India has a very good focus on the service sector as well. Okay. But when it comes to Brazil, it is different from these three countries. Okay. It is different from these three countries due to the fact that Brazil is a Latin American country, right? Brazil is a Latin American country. Apart from the climatic conditions that exist in Germany, Japan, or India, which is European as well as Germany, I mean Japan and India, the difference lies in Brazil. Why has Brazil grown in importance over the last few decades? ഒരു കൺട്രി ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് ആകണം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ബാക്കി കൺട്രീസിന് ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് ആയിട്ട് തോന്നണം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പവർ ജനറേറ്റ് ചെയ്യണം എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഇറ്റ് ഷുഡ് ഹാവ് സംതിങ് റൈറ്റ്. What can be the factor, right? Obviously, which he told is right. Oil, exporting, importing. The answer lies in what I have told. Trade has been a very good focus of Brazil. Okay, trading has been a very good focus. Whether it be the technological imports and exports they have been doing, whether it be the other kind of exports and imports they have been doing, they have been significantly trading with other nations. Okay, Brazil, the trading pattern has been good over the past few decades, and that can be contributed as one of the reasons why Brazil has been a growing power in this world. Okay, Germany, India, Japan, yes, France, you take Britain, you take USA, you take any other country like that, they're already powerful. They already have the capital required to make their country the best in this world. US, UK, you take Germany, you take France, all these countries have a definite amount of capital required to make them the best. While Brazil, India had capital, but India is now not focusing much on capital accumulation, but they are focusing more on the service sector kind of things. You take these countries, India, Brazil, countries, they are of growing importance. Okay, Canada is of growing importance due to the fact that they are enabling children to educate from other countries. For example, take that India-Canada relation. India-Canada major relation lies in the fact that many children from India are studying in Canada. That is the major point of strategic relationship. ഒരു സ്റ്റുഡന്റിനെ നമ്മൾ എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഏതൊരു സ്റ്റുഡന്റിനെ you ask them where are you studying, അവർ പറയാൻ പോകുന്ന most probable countries are Canada, UK, USA, Australia. These are the normal countries which we hear. ആരെങ്കിലും ഞാൻ ബ്രസീലിൽ പോയി പഠിക്കുമെന്ന് പറയുന്നത് കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? No, it's very rare. So that kind of a relation we do not have with Brazil, and Brazil do not have with other countries. But universities in Canada or UK or USA, for that reason, make that country much more strategically important for other countries. The reason why I'm telling that concept of universities here is, ഒരു കൺട്രിക്ക് ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് ആവാൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇപ്പൊ കാനഡ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ത്യക്ക് ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് ആവാൻ. Okay, so whenever a country sends its children or sends its students to other nations, to other countries, it automatically becomes strategically important to that nation, our country. That is where this trade occurs. അപ്പോഴാണ് significant ആയിട്ടുള്ള ട്രേഡ് വരുന്നത്, ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളെല്ലാം വരുന്നത്. ഇന്ത്യയും ഈജിപ്തും, you take India, Egypt ties for that reason. Years 1980s, 1990s തൊട്ട് ട്രേഡ് ഉണ്ട്. Okay, that has been a trading partner of India. India UK എടുത്താൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ India Canada എടുത്താൽ, India US എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ, it also contributes to the diaspora that is there. Okay, diaspora means the spread of population that is there. ഒരു Indian population that significant part is there in USA, UK and Canada. Okay, which is in the American countries and also UK. UK എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും it involves Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland as well. ഒരു സ്റ്റുഡൻസ് ഇന്ത്യയിൽ നിന്ന് പഠിക്കാൻ പോകുന്ന സ്കോട്ട്ലൻഡിൽ, അയർലൻഡ്, UK-ലോട്ടുമാണ്, വെയിൽസ് for that reason. അപ്പൊ ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള കൺട്രീസുമായിട്ട് സ്റ്റുഡൻസിനെ അയക്കുന്നത് വഴി that tends to be a relationship, ഒരു റിലേഷൻഷിപ്പ് അവിടെ തുടങ്ങുവാണ്. ഓക്കെ, ആൻഡ് അങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ ട്രേഡിംഗ് തുടങ്ങുന്നത് ചില കൺട്രീസുമായിട്ട്. ബട്ട് ചില കൺട്രീസുമായിട്ട് we have been in trade for a very long time. Our Brazil has been of growing importance due to the trade that they've been involved in. Allada where student engagements or student migration, or that's not a reason, but they have been involved in trade, a lot of trade, tech trade and other oil kind of trade, a lot of other trades for that reason with different parts of the world, and that has been one reason why they've been of growing importance in the past few decades. Adana and G4 nations നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഓർത്തു വെക്കാനുള്ള ഏറ്റവും ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് പോയിന്റ് എന്താണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ, G4 nations in the Pratyagada is what? They are not part of the permanent members of the UNSC. Appa ningu permanent members of the United Nations Security Council aaraanu ariyanundengil you will be able to differentiate. Okay, the so-called big countries are US, UK, China, France, Britain. I mean China, France, Russia. ഈ 5 countries അല്ലാത്ത മേജർ കൺട്രീസ് ഏതൊക്കെയാണെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചാൽ എല്ലാവരും പറയും ജർമ്മനി, ജപ്പാൻ, ഇന്ത്യ and Brazil. Okay, so it's easy for you to now remember G4 nations. Okay, so we'll write down a few more points regarding G4 nations. The G4 suggested that two African nations comma in addition to themselves comma be included in the enlarged UNSC. Be included in the enlarged UNSC. Be included in the enlarged UNSC. What is the full form of UNSC? United Nations Security Council. And which kind of an organ is UNSC? Judicial organ. Judicial organ is ICJ, administrative organ is Secretariat, and UNSC is the organ which carries out the security functions of the United Nations. Okay, more of a security organ. In several conferences, you can write down in several conferences during the summer of 2005. Several conferences during the summer of 2005. The African Union was unable to agree. The African Union was unable to agree. The African Union was unable to agree on two nominees. Was unable to agree on two nominees. You put a colon and write Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa all lay claim, all lay claim to a permanent African UNSC seat. To a permanent African UNSC seat. So they required a permanent seat, not only a permanent seat, but a permanent African seat on that. Okay, and their suggestion was that the African seat to rotate here. This African seat can rotate provided, for example, in this year it is being presided over by South Africa. Next year it will be Nigeria. Then and the next year it will be Kenya. Okay, the African nations or the African regions would be having the authority or power over that African seat. A permanent seat or permanent African seat. That is what I suggested. Okay, that is different from permanent seat. A permanent seat is a single country. If South Africa has a permanent seat, South Africa will remain in that permanent seat for the rest of the UNSC period. But a permanent African seat, what I meant is that it can be South Africa, it can be Chad, it can be Nigeria, it can be any other African nation coming in rotation. Okay, so that was their aim. The next heading which you can note down is uniting for consensus. Uniting for consensus. Uniting for consensus. Uniting for Consensus or UFC is a movement UFC is a movement and it's also nicknamed as the Coffee Club. Coffee. It is also nicknamed as the Coffee Club that developed in 1980s. That developed in 1980s, 1980s, 1990s period. Okay, 1980s, 90s period. In opposition to the possible expansion, in opposition to the possible expansion of the United Nations Security Council, UNSC. In opposition to the expansion of UNSC. Under the leadership of Italy, under the leadership of Italy, under the leadership of Italy, comma, it aims to counter, under the leadership of Italy, it aims to counter, it aims to counter the bids, BIDS, aims to counter the bids for permanent seats, bids for permanent seats proposed by the G4 nations, proposed by the G4 nations, proposed by G4 nations. Which are the G4 nations? Brazil, Germany, India, and Japan. Okay. And is calling for a consensus. G4 nations and is calling for a consensus before any decision. Before any decision is reached, before any decision is reached on the form and size of the Security Council. On the form and size of the Security Council. Italy, third point, or as a continuation, write it down as the next sentence. Italy, along with Pakistan, Italy, along with Pakistan, Mexico, and Egypt, in 1995, founded the Coffee Club. In 1995, founded the Coffee Club. The founders of the group were soon joined by other countries, including Spain, other countries, including Spain, Argentina, Spain, Argentina, Turkey, Canada, and South Korea. And in a short time, the group came to include about 50 countries. And in a short time, The group came to include about 50 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. In Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Go through what we have written down in G4 nations. Just figure it out. Read it in your mind. Okay. So now we'll move to the United Nations peacekeeping. Okay. The United Nations peacekeeping operations or the United Nations peacekeeping programs. Okay. You can note down United Nations peacekeeping. That's a different topic. United Nations peacekeeping. The reason why we mentioned G4 countries or that G4 group right now is because we are talking about the permanent seat of the UNSC. Okay, G4 nations they wanted a permanent seat in the UNSC, right? That was the reason. And they are not members of the, they are not permanent members of the UNSC. They require that. That is the reason why it comes under the United Nations. Okay, the G4 nations. The United Nations peacekeeping. It was created in 1948. It was created in 1948 as a means to maintain peace in conflict-ridden areas. As a means to maintain peace in conflict-ridden areas. The UN peacekeeping works. The UN peacekeeping works. The UN peacekeeping works on three basic principles. The UN peacekeeping works on three basic principles. First one, three basic principles. First one, consent of the parties. Consent of the parties. Second one, impartiality. Impartiality. Partiality line. Impartiality. Third one, non-use of force. Non-use of force. Non-use of force except in cases of self-defense. Except in cases of self-defense. Okay, so what are the three basic principles under which UN peacekeeping works? Consent of the parties, impartiality, and force can be used, but only for self-defense. Okay, that's the point. That is non-use of force except for self-defense. The UN peacekeepers, next point. The UN peacekeepers are led by the Department of Peacekeeping Operations. That is also known as DKPO. Acronym of that is DKPO. The UN peacekeepers are led by the Department of Peacekeeping Operations. It is also known as DKPO. DKPO. Next point, the United Nations Charter. The United Nations Charter gives the United Nations Security Council or gives the UNSC. The United Nations Charter gives the UNSC the power and responsibility. The power and responsibility to take collective action. The power and responsibility to take collective action to maintain international peace and security. To maintain international peace and security. To maintain international peace and security. There are currently 17. There are currently 17 UN peacekeeping operations. Peacekeeping operations deployed on 4 continents. Deployed on 4 continents. Deployed on 4 continents. Do you know when the UN peacekeeping force got the Nobel Peace Prize? Got a Nobel Peace Prize. Do you know when it got the Nobel Peace Prize? Okay, you can write down. It got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1988. Got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1988. You mark that point, okay? It's a very valid point for competitive examinations. 1988. Underline that point or you mark that point as important. So the United Nations peacekeeping, it has been there since the inception of UN. It was created in 1948 and it has been carrying out variety of peacekeeping operations involved in war, crimes, genocide, etc. It has been maintaining peacekeeping operations. Truce has been the major point of their argument or major point of their consideration. And they work on three basic principles. What are the 3 basic principles? Consent of parties, impartiality, and using of non-use of force or using of force only in case of self-defense. Okay. Those are the three basic principles in which they work on. We have already told that they got a Nobel Peace Prize in 1988. They have been working or they are deployed on 4 different number of continents, right? So these are the different points which comes under the United Nations peacekeeping or peacekeeping operations. So with context to the civil service examination as well as the other competitive examination, you must have a clear understanding regarding what is the relationship between India and the UN peacekeeping operations or India and UN peacekeeping. Whichever topic you study under this international IR and politics, okay, IR, basically IR, you have to relate it with India, whether it be the Pakistan, China, US, UK, whichever country you take, you must understand the relationship these countries have with which country? India. Because in the context of our examinations, we need to know that. Okay. So you can note down India, UN, and UN peacekeeping. India and UN peacekeeping. India and UN peacekeeping. The Indian Army is the largest. The Indian Army is the largest cumulative. The Indian Army is the largest cumulative troop contributor, troop contributor to the United Nations, peacekeeping missions, the United Nations peacekeeping missions, mandated to maintain stability, mandated to maintain stability, mandated to maintain stability and negotiate a peace settlement in turbulent regions of the world and negotiate a peace settlement in the turbulent regions of the world. So far, next point, okay, so far, India has provided almost 2 lakh troops. India has provided almost 2 lakh troops in nearly 50 of the 71 UN peacekeeping missions. In nearly 50 of the 71 UN peacekeeping missions over the past 6 decades. Over the past 6 decades, including 13 of the current 16 missions. Including 13 of the current 16 missions. Moreover, India has suffered 163 fatalities. 163 fatalities since the peacekeeping operations. Began in 1948. The most by any country. What do you mean by fatalities? India has suffered 163 fatalities എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. You understand that word, okay? Suffered എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു വേർഡിങ്ങിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു കാര്യം നമ്മൾ പറയുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് യൂസ് ദ ഫ്രേസ് ഓർ ദ വേർഡ് സഫേർഡ്, ഇറ്റ് മീൻസ് ദാറ്റ് സംതിങ് ബാഡ് ഹാസ് occurred, right? 163 fatalities എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ basically these are peacekeeping operations or peacekeeping programs. So as you rightly said, these are basically referring to the deaths that have occurred, okay? The problems that have occurred to the people who are there in that peacekeeping mission, the injuries they have suffered, അതിനാണ് fatalities ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. Fatalities always refer to injuries, deaths, etc. Okay? അതാണ് fatalities. So we'll discuss a few UN peacekeeping terms, okay? After which we'll go for a break. We'll discuss certain peacekeeping terms of UN. Okay? Can note down UN peacekeeping terms. Certain terms related to UN peacekeeping. Certain terms related to UN peacekeeping. Certain terms or some terms related to UN peacekeeping. Peace operations. First word is peace operations. Peace operations, you know, right? You know what peace operations are, right? Peace operations, what do you mean by peace operations? പീസിന് കൂടുതൽ ത്രസ്റ്റ് കൊടുക്കുക, പീസിന് ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് കൊടുക്കുക, പീസ് വരുന്ന രീതിയിലുള്ള ഓപ്പറേഷൻസ് ക്യാരി ഔട്ട് ചെയ്യുക. Those are peace operations. What is meant by peace building? Next point, next term is peace building. Peace building. Peace building എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്തായിരിക്കും? എക്സാക്ട്ലി സമാധാനം കൊണ്ടുവരിക അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പീസ് കൊണ്ടുവരിക. ഒരു സ്ഥലത്ത് ഇപ്പൊ ഒരു വാർ ഉണ്ടായി. That obviously will be, as I've told in the previous classes, obviously 5 to 10 years it will have the issues of conflict. That country will have the issues of conflict. അപ്പൊ അവിടെ തിരിച്ച് പീസ് കൊണ്ടുവരിക, ഒരു സ്റ്റെബിലിറ്റി കൊണ്ടുവരിക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് പീസ് ബിൽഡിങ്ങിന്റെ മീനിങ്. സോ യു നോ ദാറ്റ്. പീസ് കീപ്പർ. തേർഡ് ടേം ഇസ് പീസ് കീപ്പർ. പീസ് കീപ്പേഴ്സ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ആരായിരിക്കും? It will be mostly civilian staff, okay? If you don't know, you can write it down, or if you want to write, you can note it down. It will be civilian staff. Peacekeepers എന്ന് എപ്പോഴും പറയുന്നത് it refers to the military component, okay? Military component of UN peacekeeping-നെയാണ് നമ്മൾ what do you call it? Peacekeepers. Peacekeepers എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് mostly civilian staff ആണ്, normal staff ആണ്. അതിൽ നമ്മൾ എപ്പോഴും ഈ പീസ് കീപ്പേഴ്സ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പീസ് കീപ്പിങ്ങിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയുമ്പോൾ വി റെഫർ ടു ദ മിലിറ്ററി കോമ്പോണന്റ്, ഓക്കെ? വി റെഫർ ടു ദ മിലിറ്ററി കോമ്പോണന്റ് ഓഫ് ദി പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ് ഓപ്പറേഷൻസ്. നെക്സ്റ്റ് വേർഡ് ഇസ് പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ്. പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ്. വാട്ട് ഡു യു മീൻ ബൈ പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ്? സമാധാനം നിലനിർത്തുക. ഒരു പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ് ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ ഏതാ? UN, ഓക്കെ? ആ ഉള്ള പീസ്, ഉള്ള സ്റ്റെബിലിറ്റി, ഉള്ള ആ ഒരു മെയിൻറ്റെയിൻ ചെയ്തേക്കുന്ന പീസ്, ഉള്ള സ്റ്റെബിലിറ്റി, maintaining that stability, maintaining that peace, maintaining that tranquility that is there in that society or that country or that state, അത് മെയിൻറ്റെയിൻ ചെയ്ത് പോകുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ് കൊണ്ട് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. അത് മെയിൻറ്റെയിൻ ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഓപ്പറേഷൻ ആണ് പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ് ഓപ്പറേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. യു ക്യാൻ റൈറ്റ് ഇറ്റ് ഡൗൺ ആസ് എ നെക്സ്റ്റ് പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ് ഓപ്പറേഷൻ. പീസ് മെയിൻറ്റെയിൻ ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ട ഓപ്പറേഷൻ ആണ് പീസ് കീപ്പിംഗ് ഓപ്പറേഷൻ. Next term is peacekeeping services agreement. Peacekeeping services agreement. Peacekeeping services agreement. This one you can note down. It's a Canadian initiative. It's a Canadian initiative undertaken to streamline undertaken to streamline and improve, undertaken to streamline and improve the UN system, funding of peacekeeping, UN system funding of peacekeeping, under which a contractual agreement would be signed, under which a contractual agreement would be signed under which a contractual agreement, a contract would be signed using standard costs, for the provision of military personnel, for the provision of military personnel and equipment to peacekeeping missions. And equipment to peacekeeping missions. Provision of military personnel and equipment to peacekeeping missions. Provision of military personnel and equipment to peacekeeping missions. Next term which you can note down is peacemaking. Peacemaking. What will it mean by peacemaking? The Malayalam word itself, peace making എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ peace ഉണ്ടാക്കുക അല്ലെങ്കിൽ peace generate ചെയ്യുക എന്നുള്ള ഒരു concept ആണ്. If you write it in English, you can write it in such a way, bringing an end to a conflict. Bringing an end to a conflict. Bringing an end to a conflict and establishing peace. ഒരു എക്സിസ്റ്റിംഗ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള കോൺഫ്ലിക്റ്റിനെ എൻഡ് ചെയ്ത് പീസ് കൊണ്ടുവരിക. പീസ് മേക്കിംഗ്. Peace restoration. Next term is peace restoration. പീസ് റീസ്റ്റോർ ചെയ്യുക അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റെസ്റ്റോറേഷൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്തായിരിക്കും? എക്സാക്ട്ലി, അതായത് എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു കാരണത്താൽ, ഇറ്റ് ക്യാൻ ബി വാർ, ഇറ്റ് ക്യാൻ ബി ജനസൈഡ്, ഇറ്റ് ക്യാൻ ബി മസാക്കർ, എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു കാരണത്താൽ നഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു പോയ പീസ്, ഓക്കെ, അതിനെ റീസ്റ്റോർ ചെയ്യുക എന്നുള്ള ഉദ്ദേശമാണ് പീസ് റെസ്റ്റോറേഷൻ. ഓക്കെ, the next term which you can note down is preventive deployment. This is a very important term. Okay, preventive deployment is a very important term. You can mark that. Preventive deployment, not employment, it's deployment. Preventive deployment, you put a colon or a hyphen and write of an interpositional force, of an interpositional force, of an interpositional force to deter violence, to deter, D-E-T-E-R, to deter violence in a zone of potential conflict, in a zone of potential conflict, in a zone of potential conflict where tension is rising among parties. Where tension is rising among parties. The parties in the states are the states, countries, and all concept. Where tension is rising among parties. Preventive diplomacy. Next term is preventive diplomacy. A word what would be preventive diplomacy? Preventive diplomacy not that. It's actually preventing dispute from occurring, right? So you can note down action to prevent disputes. An action to prevent disputes from arising between parties. An action to prevent disputes from arising between parties. രണ്ട് പാർട്ടി തമ്മിൽ ഒരു ഡിസ്പ്യൂട്ട് ഉണ്ടാകാതിരിക്കാൻ പ്രിവെന്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നതാണ് പ്രിവെന്റീവ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. And the last term, it's again a very important term, prisoner of war, POW. Some of you might have heard about this, prisoner of war. Prisoner of war, it's also known as POW. A detained person, POW or prisoner of war is a detained person who has engaged in conflicts and has been detained or is captured, has been detained or is being captured or has been captured by the armed forces of the enemy. By the armed forces of the enemy. As such, he or she is entitled to the combatant's privilege, of immunity, combatants, COMBATANTS, ANT', combatants, privilege of immunity from the municipal law, of the capturing state, for warlike activities or for warlike acts which do not amount to breaches of the law of armed conflict. Which do not amount to breaches of law of the armed conflict. Breaches of the law of the armed conflict. Basically, prisoner of war എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു വാർ ഒക്കെ അറിയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും നമ്മള് മറ്റൊരു പാർട്ടിയിലേക്ക് മറ്റൊരു കൺട്രിയുടെ ആർമി നമ്മളെ ക്യാപ്ചർ ചെയ്യുകയാണെങ്കിൽ വി ബിക്കം എ prisoner of war automatically. കാരണം അവർ നമ്മളെ ഡീറ്റെയിൻ ചെയ്യും. Two countries are involved in a war. Okay, for example, if you are taking Germany and Japan for that reason, if a soldier or if a person of Germany was involved in that operation, if he falls into the hands of the Japanese army, he automatically would be detained. Japanese rules, Japanese law and order അനുസരിച്ചായിരിക്കും his or her കാര്യങ്ങൾ പോകുന്നത്. Okay, കാര്യങ്ങൾ പോകുന്നതെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ his or her detention principles and other things would be governed by Japanese people. That was a simple example. അതായത് prisoner of war ആവുന്ന വാർ നടന്ന് നമ്മൾ മറ്റേ കൺട്രി ഒപ്പോണന്റിന്റെ ഹാൻഡിലേക്ക് വരുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ വാർലൈക്ക് ആക്ടിവിറ്റി എന്തെങ്കിലും ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഒപ്പോണന്റിന്റെ കയ്യിലേക്ക് വന്ന് അവർ നമ്മളെ ഡീറ്റെയിൻ ചെയ്യുന്ന പ്രോസസ്സിനാണ് prisoner of war ആവുന്നത്. That's how we become a POW or a prisoner of war. So these are the different UN peacekeeping terms. Okay, so you just go through the different terms which you have studied right now. Let's check whether you are familiar with all the terms. Peacemaking, peacekeeping operations, peace building, prisoner of war, peace restoration, so you just read it. We'll take a break. Okay. We'll take a break till 12. See you the class by 12. We were discussing the UN peacekeeping terms, the UN peacekeeping operations, what UN peacekeeping is, different terms associated with UN peacekeeping, and so on, right? So now we'll move to a different topic, a slightly different topic from what we have been learning. We have been discussing the principal organs, T4, etc., etc. So we'll go a bit to a different topic. This is a very interesting topic. Okay, this is the 2030 agenda for the sustainable development. Okay, you can note it down. The 2030 agenda for ST, for sustainable development. This is a very interesting topic and a topic to be debated upon. The 2030 agenda for sustainable development. At the United Nations, for United Nations, you write UN, okay? At the UN Sustainable Development Summit, at the UN Sustainable Development Summit, at the UN Sustainable Development Summit on 25th September 2015, world leaders, 25th September 2015, world leaders adopted the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Concept മനസ്സിലായി തുടങ്ങി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഷോർട്ട് ഫോം എഴുതിയാലും മതി. 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Sustainable development. Titled, put it in inverted comma, transforming our world, put a colon and then write the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. The 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Close the inverted comma. Which includes a set of transforming our world, the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. You close that inverted comma and write down which includes a set of 17 SDGs. What do you mean by SDG? Okay. Sustainable Development Goals. For those who know that, you write it SDG and 169 targets and 169 targets to end poverty and 169 targets to end poverty, fight inequality, 17 SDGs and 169 targets to end poverty, fight inequality, and to tackle climate change. We discuss this topic and we move on. Okay. So, what's your take on climate change? Is it really happening? Is it a hoax? Is it really happening? It's really happening. And who do you think, or which countries do you think will be the major components leading to this climate change? Climate change അല്ലെങ്കിൽ global warming ഒക്കെ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന അതിൽ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ കോൺട്രിബ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന കൺട്രീസ് ഏതൊക്കെ? Which all do you think? Okay, India, Canada, US, Germany is there, yes, but significantly less on as compared to China. China is one of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide. And the developed the so-called developed nations of this world, the so-called big nations of this world contribute highest to this global warming. The global warming, climate change in ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ കോൺട്രിബ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന രാജ്യങ്ങൾ, നല്ല രീതിയിലല്ല മോശം രീതിയിൽ കോൺട്രിബ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന രാജ്യങ്ങളാണ് USA, Canada, China, India. They are the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide. And അതിൽ ഏറ്റവും ഒരു കോൺട്രഡിക്റ്റിംഗ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പോയിന്റ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കോമഡി എന്നൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ പറയാവുന്നത്, they are the ones who have set the highest targets for sustainable development. ഏറ്റവും സസ്റ്റൈനബിൾ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റിലുള്ള ഹയസ്റ്റ് ടാർഗറ്റ്സ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സീറോ കാർബൺ എമിഷൻ പോളിസി, സീറോ കാർബൺ എമിഷൻ ബൈ 2047, 2050, 2070, കാർബൺ ന്യൂട്രാലിറ്റി അച്ചീവ് ചെയ്യുക എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്ന ഈ സെയിം കൺട്രീസ് ആണ്. നിങ്ങളൊരു കുഞ്ഞ് ഒരു ആഫ്രിക്കൻ നേഷൻ എടുത്ത് നോക്കിയിട്ട് ഇഫ് യു ആസ്ക് ദം whether they are achieving carbon neutrality, they don't even know about that. ഈ പറയുന്ന US, UK, ഇന്ത്യ, ചൈന അങ്ങനെയുള്ള സോ കോൾഡ് ബിഗ് ഡെവലപ്ഡ് നേഷൻസ് ആണ്. They are the reason why this climate change is occurring. They are the reason why this global warming is occurring. And at the same time, they are the ones who have this climate change accords, who are a part of this climate change accounts and accords, and who want to reduce global warming and who want to make a change to the climate change. Okay. So I'll ask you a question in general. All of you can answer. USA. Okay. USA has been a country. You all know who Donald Trump is, who Donald Trump was in USA. Donald Trump will then Joe Biden like power shift on, right? Presidential shift on from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. Has it positively affected US in terms of this climate case, or has it negatively affected? Donald Trump will then Joe Biden like Maria Sahajaridil. How good is it for US? How good is it for US, or how bad is it for US? Negatively affected like positively affected. US in that case, it's not only a case of US, it's a case of the globe also. I mean, global world also. മൊത്തത്തിൽ ഗ്ലോബൽ വേൾഡിനെ അഫക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു കേസായിരുന്നു ഡൊണാൾഡ് ട്രംപ് ചെയ്തിരുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് ഓക്കെ, സോ ഐ ടെൽ യു, ഈ ഡൊണാൾഡ് ട്രംപിൽ നിന്ന് ജോ ബൈഡനിലേക്ക് പ്രസിഡൻഷ്യൽ ഷിഫ്റ്റ് ഉണ്ടായി, ഇലക്ഷൻ വന്നു, ജോ ബൈഡൻ വന്നു. ജോ ബൈഡൻ ഹാസ് ബീൻ ബെറ്റർ ദാൻ ഡൊണാൾഡ് ട്രംപ് ഇൻ ടേംസ് ഓഫ് ക്ലൈമറ്റ് ക്രൈസിസ്, ഓക്കെ, ഓർ ഇൻ ടേംസ് ഓഫ് ടാക്ലിംഗ് ക്ലൈമറ്റ് ചേഞ്ച്. ബെറ്റർ ആണോ എന്ന് ചോദിച്ചാൽ ഇൻ ടേംസ് ഓഫ് ഡൊണാൾഡ് ട്രംപ് ഹി ഹാസ് ബീൻ ബെറ്റർ. വേൾഡ് ലീഡേഴ്സിനെ കമ്പയർ ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ബെറ്റർ ആണോ എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ നോ. In terms of how Donald Trump was dealing with this climate change issues, Donald Trump never even believed in climate change. He was a person like that. So, and USA has been the one who has been ardently going against this Paris Climate Accord. I mean, if you ask me personally, I also don't believe in all these accords, because these accords or these agreements are set for countries to limit their carbon emissions, to limit whatever they are doing to limit this climate change, right? ഒരു അഗ്രിമെന്റിൽ സൈൻ ചെയ്തു അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു അക്കോർഡിൽ മെമ്പർ ആണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് ഈ ക്ലൈമറ്റ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഈ കാർബൺ എമിഷൻസ് റെഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഇറ്റ് ഡസന്റ് മേക്ക് എനി സെൻസ്. ഓക്കെ, സോ ഡൊണാൾഡ് ട്രംപിൽ നിന്ന് ജോ ബൈഡനിലേക്ക് ആ ഒരു പ്രസിഡൻഷ്യൽ ഷിഫ്റ്റ് ഉണ്ടായ സമയത്ത് ഇറ്റ് ഡെഫിനറ്റ്ലി ഇംപ്രൂവ്ഡ് USA's policies towards climate change comparing to Donald Trump, but it hasn't done well for the other countries. കാരണം ഈ ക്ലൈമറ്റ് ചേഞ്ച് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വാർ എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്ന ഇഷ്യൂസ് ഒരു കൺട്രീനെ മാത്രം അഫക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന കാര്യമല്ല. ഓക്കെ, ഇഫ് ഇറ്റ് നെഗറ്റീവ്ലി അഫക്ട്സ് US, ഇറ്റ് നെഗറ്റീവ്ലി അഫക്ട്സ് ദ ഹോൾ വേൾഡ്. കാരണം US എമിറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന കാർബൺ ഡയോക്സൈഡ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് US സിറ്റിസൺസ് മാത്രമല്ല ശ്വസിക്കുന്നത്. They are not the ones who are being affected by that. It's the people of this whole society, it's the people of this globe. ലോകത്തുള്ള എല്ലാ ആൾക്കാർക്കും അതിന്റെ മോസ്റ്റ് നെഗറ്റീവ് എഫക്ട്സ് ഉണ്ട്. ഒരു കൺട്രി നന്നായിട്ട് ചെയ്താൽ, ഇൻ കേസ് എ കൺട്രി is doing good, okay, they are tackling climate change, they are doing good in terms of carbon emissions, അതിന്റെ പോസിറ്റീവ് effects are also for the whole community, it's also for the whole country, I mean whole nation, all nations. അവിടെയാണ് that's where the problem lies. അപ്പം ഈ ചൈന, US, UK, India, Canada പോലുള്ള വലിയ the big nations, the developed nations, the so-called big nations, when they don't limit themselves, the whole world is at a risk of climate change. Okay, അപ്പോഴാണ് ഈ 2030 അജണ്ട ഫോർ സസ്റ്റൈനബിൾ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സസ്റ്റൈനബിൾ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് എന്നുള്ള കോൺസെപ്റ്റിനൊക്കെ തന്നെ ഒരു വാല്യൂ ഉണ്ടാകും. When they start limiting themselves from doing this. And ഇതിൽ വേറൊരു ഇഷ്യൂ കൂടെ അസോസിയേറ്റഡ് ആണ്. We already told what sustainable development is, right? നമ്മൾ എന്താ സസ്റ്റൈനബിൾ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മൾ എന്താ പറഞ്ഞത്? പ്രസന്റ് ജനറേഷന്റെ നീഡ്സിനെ മീറ്റ് ചെയ്യണം without compromising the needs of the future generation. Future generation നമ്മൾ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത് കൊണ്ട് അവർക്ക് ഒരു റിസോഴ്സ് കിട്ടാണ്ടിരിക്കരുത്. ഈ പറയുന്ന ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് വിച്ച് ഒക്കേഴ്സ് ഇൻ ദി സോ കോൾഡ് ഇൻഡസ്ട്രിയലൈസ്ഡ് നേഷൻസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ചൈന, USA, ക്യാപിറ്റലിസ്റ്റ് നേഷൻസ്, ഇൻഡസ്ട്രിയൽ ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്ന നേഷൻസിന് അവരുടെ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് മോസ്റ്റ്ലി സസ്റ്റൈനബിൾ അല്ല. നിങ്ങൾ കാർബൺ ഡയോക്സൈഡ് ട്രെമെൻഡസ് എമൗണ്ടിൽ എമിറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ഇഫ് യു ആർ മേക്കിംഗ് ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് ദാറ്റ്സ് നോട്ട് എ സസ്റ്റൈനബിൾ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ്. ബിക്കോസ് ഹൂ നോസ് മേ ബി ഇൻ അനദർ 20 to 25 years ആ ഹോൾ കൺട്രി തന്നെ ഇല്ലാണ്ടായേക്കാം. അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങളുടെ ഫ്യൂച്ചർ ജനറേഷൻ ആ റിസോഴ്സസ് ഉപയോഗിക്കാനുള്ള ഭാഗ്യമില്ല. Okay, so that is the issue. Whenever we are talking about development, if it's not sustainable, then it's not development. Other development alla. Okay, development should be sustainable. Sustainable എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നിലനിൽക്കുന്നതായിരിക്കണം, everlasting ആയിരിക്കണം. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് അല്ല ഒരു കൺട്രി കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ it's not sustainable. Okay, so you can write down a point under this sustainable development. The sustainable development goals, otherwise known as global goals, the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals, also known as global goals, build on the build on the build on the Millennium Development Goals. Millennium, MILLENIUM, Millennium Development Goals, comma 8 anti-poverty targets. 8 anti-poverty targets that the world committed to achieving by 2015. That the world committed to achieving by 2015. 2015. Do you know when this Millennium Development Goals were initiated or started? No. It was adopted in 2000. It was adopted in 2000. The MDG was adopted in 2000. And it aimed at an array of issues. Array of issues. Array of issues. Array of issues, what does it mean? Group of issues. Okay. Array of issues that included slashing poverty. Comma hunger, comma disease, comma gender inequality, and access to water and sanitation. Enormous amount of progress. Enormous amount of progress, or you can write down as enormous progress. Okay, any which way is okay. Enormous amount of progress has been made on the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals. Okay, has been made on the MDGs, comma, showing the value of a unifying agenda. Underpinned goals and targets. Underpinned goals and targets. despite this success, ഈ success ഉണ്ടെങ്കിലും despite this success, comma, the indignity of poverty, still remains. The indignity of poverty still remains. How many SDGs are there? 17. All 17 SDGs are connected to UNDP's strategic plan, are connected to UNDP's UNDP's strategic plan focus areas. What do you mean by UNDP? United Nations Development Program. Okay, for those who don't know, it's United Nations Development Program. Okay, UNDP strategic plan focus areas. You put a colon and write sustainable development, comma, democratic governance, sustainable development, comma, democratic governance, peace building, comma, climate and disaster resilience, comma, climate and disaster resilience. They are integrated and indivisible. And balance the three dimensions of sustainable development. Put a colon and write which are the three dimensions of the sustainable development. Three dimensions of sustainable development, we have already discussed it. Three dimensions of sustainable development. Economic, social and environmental. Economic, social and environmental. So you write down all the 17 sustainable development goals now. SDGs, 17 SDGs. First one, first goal, end poverty. Second goal, zero hunger. Third goal, good health and well-being. Fourth one is quality education. Fourth goal is quality education. Fifth one is gender equality. Sixth one is clean water and sanitation. Clean water and sanitation. Seventh one is affordable and clean energy. Affordable and clean energy. Eighth one is decent work and economic growth. Eighth one is decent work and economic growth. Ninth one is triple I. What is triple I? Industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So also known as triple I. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure. 10th one is reduced inequalities. Reduced inequalities. 11th one is sustainable cities and communities. Sustainable cities and communities. 12th one is responsible consumption and production. Responsible consumption and production. Thirteenth one is climate action. Climate action. 14th one is life below water. Life below water, which mainly focus on marine organisms. Okay. Life below water. 15th one is life on land. Life on land. 16th one is peace, justice, and strong institutions. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. And 17th one is partnership for the goals. Partnership for the goals. These are the 17 sustainable development goals. Okay. So you go through, you read well the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. You just go through that topic we have discussed till now. From the 2030 agenda, you just read it in your mind and just look at all the 17 SDGs. Okay. Yes, so I hope all of you have read that. So we've been discussing what all did we discuss in this chapter? We discussed the principal organs of the UN. We discussed the G4 nations. We discussed UN peacekeeping operations, UN peacekeeping not operations, UN what UN peacekeeping is and terms related to UN peacekeeping. And we discussed what 2030 agenda for sustainable development is. Okay. So we have discussed a lot of things coming basically under this concept of United Nations. Okay. All these things are related to UN. Whether it be the 2030 agenda, the G4 nations also. How I told you how G4 nations are related to United Nations. It is because they want a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. So all these things which we have studied till now is a part of the United Nations chapter. The next thing which we are going to learn, the next chapter also deals with the United Nations, but with a change. In the first chapter, if we learned about the principal organs, in this chapter we will be discussing about the specialized agencies of the United Nations. Okay, so you can note down chapter number 2 on the second chapter, specialized agencies of the UN. Specialized agencies of the UN. Specialized agencies are legally independent. Specialized agencies are legally independent international organizations. Legally independent international organizations with their own rules, form a membership, form organs, and financial resources. Some of the agencies existed even before the First World War. Some were associated with the League of Nations. Some were associated with the League of Nations. Some were associated with the League of Nations, others were created almost simultaneously. Others were created almost simultaneously with the United Nations. United Nations ഉണ്ടായ ആ ഒരു സമയത്തിന്റെ അതിന്റെ കൂടെയാണ് അത് ഉണ്ടായത്. Others were created almost simultaneously with the United Nations, and yet others were created by the UN, and yet others were created by the UN itself to meet the emergency needs, to meet its emerging needs. Okay, not emergency, sorry. To meet its emerging needs. To meet its emerging needs. There are currently 15 specialized agencies of UN. There are currently 15 specialized agencies of the UN. Do you know any of the specialized agencies of the UN? UNESCO, UNICEF, There are 15 specialized agencies, okay? UNESCO, UNICEF. I'm not able to hear you. UNESCO, UNICEF, any others who know any other specialized agencies of the UN. Once I tell these names, you have already heard these names. Very sure that many of you might have heard the names or the organizations that I'm going to tell, but you might not be aware that these are the specialized agencies. IMF, International Monetary Fund, ILO, International Labour Organization, WHO, FAO. All these are some things or organizations which you have definitely heard. Okay, so you can note down the 15 organizations. First one you can note down ILO, International Labour Organization, ILO. Second one is FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. Agriculture Organization, not agricultural, Food and Agriculture Organization. Third one is UNESCO. What is the full form of UNESCO? Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. UNESCO. Next is an organization. United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Next is an organization which all of you have heard, World Bank. World Bank. IMF. Next one is IMF, International Monetary Fund. International Monetary Fund, also known as IMF. International Telecommunications Union, ITU. International Telecommunications Union. Universal Postal Union. Universal Postal Union. World Health Organization, WHO. World Health Organization. World Meteorological Organization. World Meteorological Organization. WMO. International Maritime Organization. International Maritime Organization. World Intellectual Property Organization. World Intellectual Property Organization. International Fund for Agricultural Development. IFAD. International Fund for Agricultural Development. Development. United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Yes, United Nations Industrial Development Organization. might have heard about this organization, WTO. It's not a WTO which you think. It's World Tourism Organization, not World Trade Organization. UNWTO, World Tourism Organization. And the 15th one is International Civil Aviation Organization. International Civil Aviation Organization. National Civil Aviation Organization. Okay, so these specialized agencies of the UN, unlike the principal organs which we have already discussed, which were the 6 principal organs which we discussed: General Assembly, Security Council, ICJ, Secretariat, ECOSOC, Trusteeship Council, which is now not in effect. Okay, so these are the 6 principal organs, and now we have 15 specialized agencies of the UN. These agencies have rules and procedures of their own. Okay, some have been, as we have already written, some have been formed before the inception of the United Nations, some even before the First World War, some during during the time period when United Nations was formed. So at different time periods, these organizations or these agencies have come up. Like, and many of you might be aware of the institutions that are there. There are some agencies to which we are not that familiar, but still IMF, World Bank, ILO, WHO, and then FAO, UNESCO. All these organizations are, or all these agencies are agencies to which we are very familiar with these agencies. We are almost aware of what all these agencies does, or what all are the functions of these agencies. But there are certain agencies like telecommunications, then tourism. These all are agencies which we might not have heard of, civil aviation, etc., etc. So we'll have a thorough understanding of these 15 agencies of this UN. Okay. So first we'll note down the International Labour Organization. It's a very important organization also, ILO. ILO, International Labour Organization. ILO is a UN specialized agency. ILO is a UN specialized agency which seeks to promote International Labour Organization. From that word itself, what do you think? Entire function. Obviously, employment, labor rights, the curricular major function. So specialized agencies which seeks to promote social justice, and internationally recognized human and labor rights. And internationally recognized human and labor rights. And internationally recognized human and labor rights. When was it formed? When was ILO formed? ILO is a very old organization. ILO was formed after the First World War, that is in 1919. 1919, okay, 1919. And is the only surviving major creation of the Treaty of Versailles. Have you heard about the Treaty of Versailles? Major creation of the Treaty of Versailles, which brought the League of Nations It brought the League of Nations into being. Brought the League of Nations into being. And it's the first specialized agency of the UN. Okay. It's the first specialized agency of the United Nations. The initial motivation was humanitarian. Underline that sentence, okay? The initial motivation was humanitarian. The initial motivation was humanitarian. The second motivation was political. Second motivation was political. And the third motivation, what can it be? Third motivation എന്തായിരിക്കും? What can be the third motivation? First motivation നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞു, second motivation political ആണെന്ന്. Third motivation is economic. Third motivation was economic. So ILO എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, ILO is the organization, okay? International Labour Organization is the organization which sets different standards, okay? Labor standards വെക്കുന്ന ഒരു ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ ആണ് ILO എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അതായത് I'll make it more clear to you. ഒരു കൺട്രി, ഓക്കെ, ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ ഇൻ എ കൺട്രി, ഒരു സ്ഥലത്തെ ആൾക്കാരെ കംപ്ലീറ്റ്ലി അവർക്ക് ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ് കൊടുക്കാതെ, ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ് യു ഓൾ നോ റൈറ്റ്, ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ്, ഈക്വൽ എംപ്ലോയ്മെന്റ്, ഈക്വൽ വേജസ്, ഓൾ ദോസ് തിങ്സ് കംസ് അണ്ടർ ദിസ് ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ്. ഈക്വൽ ആയിട്ട് ഇത് കൊടുക്കാതെ ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സിനെ ഭയങ്കരമായിട്ട് ഡിസ്ക്രിമിനേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് പോകുന്ന കൺട്രീസിന് ഒരു സെറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ് പ്രൊവൈഡ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ ആണ് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലേബർ ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ. ഓക്കെ, ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് വാട്ട് ഇസ് നോൺ ആസ് ILO. അപ്പൊ ILOന്റെ മേജർ ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അത് തന്നെയാണ്. It is to reduce this inequality which occurs due to different labor policies in different nations. Different countries might have different labor policies. Okay, that is not an issue, but it should not discriminate the people of that country. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഡിഫറെന്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള കൺട്രീസിന് ഡിഫറെന്റ് ലേബർ പോളിസീസ് വരുമ്പോൾ, ഡിഫറെന്റ് ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ് വരുമ്പോൾ അവരുടെ ഡിസ്ക്രിമിനേറ്റഡ് ആയി പോകരുത് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു പോളിസി വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് ILO സെറ്റ്സ് എ ബേസിക് സ്റ്റാൻഡേർഡ് ഓഫ് ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ്. ഇന്ന ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സും ഇന്ന ലേബർ പോളിസീസും യു മസ്റ്റ് അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ദാറ്റ് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു പോളിസി വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ ലേബർ ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ ഇസ് വർക്കിംഗ്. ഓക്കെ, സോ ILO, you can write down, ILO formulates international labor standards. ILO formulates international labor standards in the form of conventions, and recommendations. In the form of conventions and recommendations, setting minimum standards of basic labor rights. Setting minimum standards of basic labor rights. Labor rights. ILO ഈ ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ് സെറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നതും ലേബർ അസിസ്റ്റൻസ് കൊടുക്കുന്നതിന് ഉപരിയായിട്ട് it also provides technical assistance. It also provides technical assistance primarily in the fields of it also provides technical assistance primarily in the fields of vocational training, employment policy, labor administration, labor administration, labor law, working conditions, management development, cooperatives, social security, labor statistics, labor statistics. Okay, just go through what we have written on the ILO, what International Labour Organization is, what are its motivations, which all areas does it give technical assistance, what is the basic function, you just go through that. When was ILO formed? 1990. That is after the you can note down the ILO constitution. The ILO constitution, ILO means International Labour Organization. ILO constitution was written between January and April 1919 by the Labour Commission set up by the Peace Conference. By the Labour Commission set up by the Peace Conference. You write down the composition of commission. That is, ഏതൊക്കെ countries commission ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. Composition of commission. Belgium, Cuba, Czechoslovakia, C Z E C H O Slovak, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, France, Italy, Japan, Poland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Under the chairmanship of Samuel Gompers. Constitution എഴുതിയതിന്റെ chairmanship ആണ്. It is the chairmanship of the Constitution. He was the chairman of the Constitution, Samuel Gompers. And he was the head of the GOMPERS, Samuel Gompers. GOMPERS, Gompers. And he was the head of the African Federation of Labor. American Federation of Labor. AFL. American Federation of Labor. He was the head of the American Federation of Labor. So between what time period was the Constitution written? ILO's Constitution was written between January and April 1919. There were 9 countries associated with the same. Who was the head? Who was the chairman of this Constitution? Samuel Gompers. And he was a member of the American Federation of Labor. Okay. So basically, why was this ILO set up? What was the need for ILO? What was the need for ILO or International Labour Organization? To set an equal or just labor rights. Okay. എല്ലാ കൺട്രീസിനും ഈക്വൽ ആയിട്ട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ജസ്റ്റിസ് പ്രൊവൈഡ് ചെയ്യുന്ന രീതിയിലുള്ള ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ്, ലേബർ റിഫോംസ് എൻഷുർ ചെയ്യുന്നതിനാണ്. That was the reason why International Labour Organization was set up. Okay. Different countries might have different labor policies. That is not the issue which is concerning ILO, but the issue concerning ILO is every worker should get a wage that for which they work. ജോലി ചെയ്യുന്നതിനുള്ള പൈസ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വേതനം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ശമ്പളം അവർക്ക് കിട്ടണം എന്നുള്ള ഒരു ലേബർ റൈറ്റ്സ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ലേബർ റിഫോംസ് എൻഷുർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ ആയിരുന്നു ILO or International Labour Organization. Okay. So you can write the last few sentences after which we will wind up. By September 1999, the ILO conference had adopted ILO conference had adopted 182 conventions, 182 conventions and 190 recommendations. 182 conventions and 190 recommendations, which together form the International Labour Code. Together form the International Labour Code. The ILO code, COD code. A convention banning the grave forms of GRAV, grave. A convention banning the grave forms of child labor. The grave forms of child labor was adopted in 1999. Was adopted in 1999. The principal political organ of the ILO, the principal political organ of the ILO is the International Labour Conference. Is the International Labour Conference, which meets annually. It's the International Labour Conference, which meets annually. The ILO, last sentence, the ILO set up the International Institute for Labour Studies. The ILO set up the International Institution for Labour Studies. International Institution for Labour Studies in Geneva. Where is Geneva? Switzerland. In Geneva, at Geneva in 1960. At Geneva in 1960, comma 60, 1960, which focuses on education. And research studies, which focuses on education and research studies on social and labor policy, which focuses on education and research studies on social and labor policy. Okay, that's it regarding ILO. We'll look at the other specialized agencies as well as the world employment and social outlook, and other agencies. We'll discuss it in the coming classes. Okay, so we'll wind up for the day. Thank you.